Hi everyone, I'm Wendy, and today I'm trying to imitate one of these Tasty Bite Indian dinners. This was actually a request from a viewer, so feel free to leave your ideas in the comments, and I just might use yours for a future video. But this request was to make one of these dinners into an Instant Pot version without oil. Today I'm starting with the Bombay potatoes, but this brand has many different varieties. If you see others that you'd like me to recreate, let me know that in the comments as well. But for today, let's get started with the Bombay potatoes. If you want to jump right to the recipe, I'll have chapter links that you can jump to the next section, but I wanted to start off by showing you the method for how I decided to recreate this recipe. I'm not going to guarantee that this tastes like the actual thing because I actually haven't tried these meals because I am oil-free and they do contain oil. So what I do is I start by looking at the ingredients. When you look at the ingredients, you can start to get an idea of the proportions because they're listed in descending order by volume. So whatever is listed first makes up the bulk of the volume, while whatever's listed last makes up the least amount. For this one, we know that water, potatoes, chickpeas, and caramelized onions are going to make up the bulk of this dish. And then, like I said, the request for today was to make this oil-free, so I'm simply going to leave the oil out. I'm used to cooking oil-free, and for something like this, it'll make no difference whether you have the oil or not. It will definitely have a different taste from a traditional dish, but if you're used to eating oil-free, you'll prefer it without the oil. Next, we get to the spices, and some of them are listed out, but some of them are just listed as spices. So we know this has garlic, ginger, and cilantro, and I found multiple different labels for this product. Some labels also include coriander, cumin, and chili powder. As far as the rest of the spices, I went to the internet and searched for traditional Bombay potatoes recipes. I probably looked at 7 or 8 different recipes to get an idea of the amounts and types of spices that are usually used. And from there, I made up a combination to make my own unique spice blend. I'll have a blog post linked below the video with all of the exact ingredients and measurements. So I'm starting with my 6-quart Instant Pot. I'm turning on the saute function on high. It only takes a minute or two to heat up, and then you can add your onions. I'm using 2 large onions, which was about 16 ounces. The packaged product included caramelized onions, so that's why I'm sauteing my onions here. Usually caramelized onions would use butter or oil, but we're just going to dry saute these onions to get a little extra flavor in them. If you leave them alone for a few minutes and then start to stir them, they'll start to brown and get that caramelized flavor. If you're in a rush and you don't care about that little bit of extra flavor, feel free to simply dump all of the ingredients in and skip the saute step. But if you are sauteing your onions, once they start to brown, you'll want to deglaze the bottom of your Instant Pot before you add everything else in. This is really important so you don't get the burn warning. If you start with the saute and there's anything left on the bottom, sometimes it can trigger the burn warning in your Instant Pot, and that's never fun to deal with. So it's helpful to use a flat wooden spoon like I'm using here to scrape up everything off of the bottom. Once you do that, you can turn off the saute function and we'll add everything else in. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cups of water so the onions don't continue to cook and burn. Next, I have about 6 cloves of minced garlic, and you can use 1 to 2 teaspoons of fresh grated ginger. I keep ginger in my freezer, which makes it really easy to grate. And you could also saute this a little bit with the onions. I forgot to do that, and so I'm just throwing it in now. Then I'm adding 2 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes that I've cut into bite-sized pieces. Here I have 2 cans of chickpeas, which I've drained and rinsed. If you cook your own, you could use about 3 cups of cooked chickpeas. Then I'm also adding 2 more cups of water, and I'm stirring everything around before we add the remaining ingredients. Next, I have all of my spices. I have 1 tablespoon of garam masala, which is a traditional Indian spice blend. You should be able to find it in any grocery store, but if not, it's easy to find online. Then I have 2 teaspoons of cumin, a tablespoon of coriander, 2 teaspoons of dry mustard, then 1 teaspoon of turmeric, and finally, this is optional, but I have about a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. If you like some heat, you could add up to a teaspoon. On the other hand, if you don't like heat, you could completely leave this out or substitute a mild chili powder. I'm adding these spices on top, but I'm not going to stir them in. Traditionally in Indian cooking, often the spices will be toasted or bloomed in oil. This brings out some additional flavor, but again, we're not using oil for this recipe, and as far as toasting the spices, If you were cooking this on the stovetop, you could add it after you saute the onions and cook the spices a little bit at that point. But if we did that in the Instant Pot, that's another thing that might cause the burn warning. So I'm simply adding the spices on top. And finally, I'm adding 2 6-ounce cans of tomato paste. Tomato is another thing that can cause the burn warning, so that's why I'm putting that on top as well, and I'm not going to stir it in. And that's everything, so I'll put the lid on and I'm cooking this for 5 minutes at high pressure. After it's done cooking, I let it fully natural release, but if you're in a hurry, you could do a quick release. As you can see, even though we put the tomato paste on top, by the time it's done, everything has been mixed in. Because of the high pressure, everything boils and bubbles and mixes together while it's cooking. And here I've added in a little bit of lime juice. I like to freeze lime juice, so I always have it on hand even if I don't have fresh limes. This one I had frozen with the zest, so I'm throwing 1 cube of that into the Instant Pot, and it's warm enough that it'll melt in no time. The lime juice is taking the place of the mango powder. Even though the packaged product used mango powder, I decided to go with lime juice because it's easier for most people to find. You can find the mango powder online or at an Indian grocery store, but I wanted to make this recipe really accessible. So if you have some mango powder, feel free to use that instead, but a little bit of lime juice will give a similar tangy taste. So now this is ready to eat. I recommend serving it with brown rice or your favorite whole grain. And finally, I'm adding just a little bit of chopped cilantro. I generally don't cook with salt, so I left the salt out as well. But if you like to add salt to your food, feel free to sprinkle a little on at the end. I think this meal is so delicious. It has a little bit of heat, a tiny bit of tang, and so much flavor. This recipe makes between 4 and 8 servings depending on your personal appetite. You can make a big batch and eat it all week, or freeze it for later. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I recreated this packaged meal so it fits into my whole food plant-based lifestyle. If there are other products you'd like to see me recreate, let me know that in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.